Some ideas for studying the parables of Jesus. Adapted from the Bible Project on YouTube. Jesus of Nazareth was a master teacher. Some of his most famous teachings are told in short stories called parables, as the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of pearls. When he found the ultimate pearl, he sold everything so that he could buy it. Or, the kingdom of God, it's like a little mustard seed that a farmer planted in his garden. It grew and became a huge tree and birds came to settle in its branches. Jesus didn't tell parables to make everything clear, rather, he wanted to stimulate the imagination and invite people to see from a new perspective what God is doing in the world. How to read the parables of Jesus. There are many great teachers who have used stories throughout history to teach students about morality, religion and philosophy. But Jesus did not use his parables to teach abstract religious or moral ideals. He said his parables were about himself and his mission. His mission, which was to announce that the kingdom of God was to come, both on earth and in heaven. In the days of Jesus, the Israelites were ruled by the Roman Empire. But the previous scriptures promised that their God would someday come to rule his people as king, so many Israelites wanted to revolt against Rome and fight for their freedom. This is what some people thought of as the kingdom of God. But Jesus was a poor traveling prophet who healed the sick and invited people to follow him. And he said that this was the coming of God's kingdom and that didn't match people's expectations. Jesus used some parables to help people imagine that his little move was the coming of God's kingdom. Like the parable that the kingdom of God is leaven, hidden in a lump of dough that becomes bread, but it is going to change everything. Jesus also told parables about the changed values of God's kingdom, comparing the old ways with the new ways. He told of how the least important people in the world are actually the most important people to God, especially those who are poor and of low status. This is demonstrated in the parable of the business owner who hired workers all day, in the morning, later in the day and even towards the end of the day. And at the end of the day, when it came time to pay everyone, he paid all the workers the same wage. This statement from Jesus shows that money and status are irrelevant to God, as he offers his generous mercy to all. However, not all parables indicate a happy ending. Some of his parables are really intense, as Jesus was intense in the tradition of Israel's prophets. He also told parables to criticize Israel's leaders because they mistook their kingdom for God's kingdom. So Jesus warned the leaders of his day that if they did not accept his offer of God's kingdom, they would be headed for destruction. Also there is the parable of the landowner who built a beautiful vineyard, and he expects it to bear fruit. Jesus gets this parable from the prophet Isaiah, but then he adapts it. The landowner then appoints managers to take care of his vineyard, and at the harvest he sends servants to gather the fruit. But those managers kill the servants. So the landowner sends his own son to confront the managers and they kill him too. Therefore, Jesus asks those around him, "What do you all think this landowner should do?" Many in the crowd indicated that the owner is going to punish those managers and hire new ones. Jesus knew that if Israel continued on their present path, they would be destroyed by Rome. So in parables like this, he forces people to make a decision to continue on or to accept his offer of God's kingdom. Are the people going to reject Jesus by ignoring him, or change and trust, and then follow him? If this message of God's kingdom is so important, why hide it in parables? Why not be clearer? Well, through riddles and parables, Jesus was able to make really bold claims that reveal the truth to open-minded people. For those who listen, then they can think about it and go deeper. But the parables would also hide his message from those who opposed him so that he could hurry more time for his teachings. More time for what? Jesus was preparing his closest followers for the greatest surprise yet. Jesus claimed that the God of Israel would come to rule over his people, not by coercion or violent force but by self-giving love. Such love as he should die for their sins. But his death was not the end. Jesus said his death would be like a little seed buried in the ground, but then it would grow and produce a crop with many seeds. And this has not changed, even today. We all have seeds that can grow and produce more seeds. So these parables explain who Jesus was and what he intended. And the gospel writers have preserved these parables so that every generation of Jesus' followers can now read and ponder them. And imagine how God's kingdom is still at work even today. These old parables are still full of new surprises and challenges. They are like a storehouse full of treasures, some new, some old, and it's all waiting for us to discover and act on them.